Hello there and welcome back to some more Forza Top Gear laps. Today we are taking a look at the oldest cars here in Forza Motorsport 7, and we begin with, well, what is the oldest car here in this game. This is the 1926 Bugatti Type 35C, 95 horsepower, 95 foot-pound torque, 1,676 pounds of weight. This is the lightest car here today, and yeah, it is the oldest car in Forza Motorsport history, coming in with a DLC pack a couple of months ago. A quick interesting aside about the list of cars that we have here today. These are the oldest cars in this game. There's a couple of subtractions from this list just because I didn't want too many duplicates and so on and so forth. But this list actually looks entirely different to what it would have done if we'd done this in Forza Motorsport 6, which is pretty interesting. In fact, only 2 cars here today were actually in the previous game. Oh, actually, no, sorry, 3 cars here today were in the previous game. And if we'd done this list just a couple of months ago, even then, you know, quite a few of these cars wouldn't have been on this list at all because they weren't in the game, which is a pretty fascinating situation. The Bugatti is an older race car. I know I've banned race cars from here before, or rather banned for now. We're not quite sure if we're going to take race cars around here yet. I will say I'm allowing these cars here because by the game's consideration they're not on race tyres, which means they don't get any benefit from that. They're sort of on standard tyres, as the game would say. So they're allowed around here for now. These ones, we'll think about race tyre cars in the future, but as of right now we're not running any of those. This Bugatti though, it is a fun car to drive, surprisingly decent as well. You can really chuck it around some corners and just let the mechanical grip carry you around. It is of course slow, and it is hilarious to watch it go around the track, but all in all, a pretty cool, fun, decent car to drive. Next up, the 1932 Alfa Romeo 8C 2300 Spyder, 155 horsepower, 173 foot-pound torque, 2,185 pounds of weight. Those figures, of course, a far cry from the later 8C, which we have had go around the track. This, yeah, it's not going to compete with that car. This 8C though, pretty fun car. Again, this was another DLC. I believe this was in the last DLC pack, if I'm not mistaken, for this game, as of time of recording, which is July 3rd. Yeah, this one's pretty interesting. The actual engine configuration on this is really very interesting as well. It's supercharged and it's like buried in the engine. It's a weird sort of thing. As far as I understand, it's basically 2 inline 4s stuck together to make a V8, and there's like a supercharger in the middle of them. It's a fascinating car. Weird thing, I'm not too mechanical, so I might have got that wrong, but yeah, the engine situation in this is a pretty fun, and it's also a pretty cool looking car if you ask me. I'm not really into these older time cars, but something about this Alfa, of course it's got that standard Alfa charisma. As far as it goes to drive, well, bit weird, the car overpowers the tyres badly. You can, yeah, the tyres are way too skinny for this thing. This car basically needs double the tyre widths to really make it effective. And as a result, the handling isn't great. The diff doesn't help because it's got a really awful differential that just likes to spin one of the rear tyres. Not a great car to drive, although with some modifications potentially could be a pretty fun one. Next up we have the 1932 Ford Deluxe 5-window Coupe, 65 horsepower, 130 foot-pound torque, 2,398 pounds of weight. This is sort of our first sort of proper car here today. In fact, this is one of the only sort of standard road-going-y cars today. This is sort of what you would kind of see on the roads in 1930s America. Yeah, so it's a pretty interesting car, pretty fascinating to chuck around this track. I do actually like the 1932 Ford Deluxe. We don't have the 1940 here today, because I didn't see the point of running 2 Ford Deluxes. Technically, the 1940 Ford Deluxe is also one of the oldest cars in this game, but that one got omitted because, again, don't really want duplication on that part, because we've already got one Deluxe, and this is actually my preferred Deluxe. I like this one. Again, it's an oldie-timey car. It's a bit of fun. The 40 is a little bit sort of more modern, a little bit more powerful. It's still a great car, still a lot of fun when you chuck a NASCAR engine in it and so on and so forth, but yeah, I think the 32's got a little bit more character to it. That being said, in the way it drives, not good. It's very slow. It is the second least powerful car here today, and it is probably the worst power to weight ratio wise. It's not quick. It's strangely ungrippy. Again, it sort of almost feels like the tyres are the main issue here. They just don't offer enough grip. The car likes to sort of slide in place, which is a little bit weird. Sort of feels like you're driving on ice. And overall, it's just a weird car to get to grips with. I never really did. I wasn't too used to the way this car drove, even after the 6 laps that I do with all the cars. Yeah, this one never quite got to grips with it, so maybe not quite as fast as it could possibly be, but it wouldn't have been hugely quick. Anyways, next up, 1939 BMW 328, 80 horsepower, 94 foot-pound torque, 1,830 pounds of weight. This is the least torquey car here today by just 1 foot-pound of torque. Of course, the Bugatti is the second least, which we've already seen. The 328, not too sure on what this car is. Again, it's another DLC car. I wasn't aware the 320 was anything other than a 3 Series, but no, apparently this is the original BMW 328, and it's a magnificent looking thing. Certainly, I love the skirted rear wheels. I love the silly colours it comes in and the colour-coded wheels. Yeah, and you can also do some pretty interesting modifications to basically turn it into a road racer if you so desire. Yeah, the 328, a pretty fun car, and definitely the oldest BMW in the game. In fact, it is the oldest German car as well, so there's a fun fact for you. As far as this one goes to drive, I was pleasantly surprised by this one. First off, let's just get the bad out of the way. It's slow. There's no way around that. It is a very slow car. It's got 80 horsepower. It's not quick. However, handling-wise, it actually feels modern, which you really wouldn't expect from this car. But yeah, it's got really good turn-in, the grip's good, differential's good. Everything on this car is just really good, and it does genuinely feel like you're driving a modern car. The suspension's also relatively stable on this. It doesn't wallow around like you'd expect it to. Honestly, it does kind of feel like it's almost from like the 90s, maybe even the early 2000s. A really competent car, really good car, and I'd be kind of curious to see what this would do with some level of modifications. I'm sure it could be a pretty interesting car to go racing with. Next up, we have a couple of F1 cars, or in fact we have a trio of them. This is the first one, the 1939 Auto Union Type D, 485 horsepower, 413 foot-pound torque, 2,816 pounds of weight. This is the most powerful car here today, the torqueyest car, and the heaviest car here today. This thing is pretty insane. And yes, you heard me right on those figures. This thing almost has 500 horsepower, and it's from 1939. Yeah. So basically what that means is you've got modern day power matched with olden day tyres and brakes. These things are pretty terrifying to drive, all 3 of them. That's a bit of a spoiler warning for you. The Auto Union, yeah, we've had this since Forza Motorsport 5. It was a pretty insane thing in that game, and it still remains pretty darn insane today. It is extremely fast. This thing genuinely would give modern supercars a run for their money in a straight line. It's crazy. However, it has the worst brakes of any car I have ever driven in this game, I think. The brakes are appalling in this thing. It also has hilarious amounts of understeer because of the tyres, but as far as all of these older F1 cars, this is the most controllable, in my opinion. This one is actually the best one of the bunch, because it certainly isn't our next car, the 1939 Maserati 8CTF, 360 horsepower, 332 foot-pound torque, 1,764 pounds of weight. Again, I believe this did actually race against the Auto Union, as did our next car. This one is also a Forza Motorsport 5 edition. That's when it came into the game to rival the Auto Union, and as you can probably tell by the statistics, it was rather outclassed. Despite being a lot lighter than the Auto Union, it does have a lot less power, and on top of that, it is awful to drive. It is appalling. Basically, you have the bad brakes of the Auto Union matched with worse understeer than the Auto Union, and also no rear end grip whatsoever. The Auto Union, the rear end on it is actually surprisingly planted. You can actually do a lot more throttle wise than you'd expect to. This thing is terrible. It really does not allow you to have much freedom at all in the throttle. If you get it wrong, you are going to spin out. You're probably going to kill yourself doing it. Yeah, the Maserati, not a good car to drive. Really not a good car to drive. I can't recommend it. I really would struggle to recommend this car to anyone playing this game, get the auto unit or get our next car, which is the 1959 Mercedes-Benz W154, 483 horsepower, 361 foot-pound torque, 2,683 pounds of weight. This one sounds a lot more like the Auto Union in terms of its power figures. Of course, 2 less horsepower than the Auto Union, a lot less torque than the Auto Union, but you do get 200 pounds less of weight. So yeah, it's also probably the weirdest looking of all these cars. I have no idea. It looks like a bullet. It's pretty incredible. I mean, all of them kind of look like bullets, but this one, especially with its sort of weird mouth grill as well. Really weird looking car. Sounds incredible though. I believe this thing's V12. Not 100% on that, but I believe it does have a V12 engine, which is lovely, and I think the Auto Union might have as well. As far as this one goes to drive, again, it's much more of a comparison to the Auto Union. I would say it's faster than the Auto Union, but worse to drive. It has a bit more understeer, the brakes are a lot worse. Well, not a lot worse, but they're bad. The brakes on all these are terrible, but this one probably has the worst brakes of them all because it is the fastest. Yeah, slightly worse to drive, a little bit more confusing, a little bit weird. The back end does like to brake free on this one, unlike in the Auto Union, but crucially, it's better than the Maserati in every single conceivable way. So, yeah, I'd say the Auto Union probably wins that battle, although, of course, the times will tell. And finally today, the 1949 Willys Jeep, 60 horsepower, 106 foot-pound torque, 2,137 pounds of weight. This is the least powerful car here today, which is kind of ironic when you consider it is the newest. Yes, we've had the Willys Jeep since Horizon 2. I believe this car came in as a barn find. And yeah, it's sort of gained a reputation for being a surprisingly good car. I've driven a few of these. I've had a S1 Class 1 in Horizon 2, I believe, and I might have done the same in Horizon 3. And they're very capable cars within the off-road class. They offer really nice handling, you know, decent amount of speeds, because obviously if you're A-Class, S1 Class in Horizon games, you're probably sticking the V8 in it, which makes it super powerful. Of course, driving the stock one, it's nowhere near as quick as it would be fully customised, but you can sort of see why people like these things, sort of to build them up as race cars, because suspension, fantastic, brakes are great. The only thing this car really has an issue with is the engine. It reminds me a lot of the Jeep Grand Wagoneer. I have no idea why the old Jeeps in this game have this, apart from the CJ5, which is terrifying, and it did try to kill me. The Wagoneer and the Willys Jeep they both have excellent suspension, grip's good, the brakes are good. They just miss out a little bit, and with the Jeep it's particularly frustrating because it's slow, and part of that is down to the gearbox. Now, admittedly the engine's slow, it makes 60 horsepower, but it only has a 3-speed gearbox, and you're redlining it down that straight. Like, it's literally giving you all it's got. It sort of runs out of puff at about 77 miles per hour, and I sort of think, you know, even with a 4-speed, it might be able to do more in terms of its straight line speed. Moving on to the leaderboard then, and the Auto Union Type D, unsurprisingly, was the fastest car today, going into 58th place with a 120.394. It's quicker than a Lamborghini Countach and an Alfa Romeo 8C, which is pretty incredible. And in 63rd place, the Mercedes-Benz W154 with a 120.873, just missing out on a modern-day C63 S Coupe, which is weird. Yeah, those F1 cars are incredibly quick, and while it was by far and away the worst to drive, the Maserati still does pretty good as well, going into 71st place with a 122.082, which does beat out a BMW M4 and a Jeep Cherokee Trackhawk, which I guess is sort of the modern day equivalent of that car because it's too powerful for its own good, surprisingly. Anyways, moving down the board some more, we find the Alfa Romeo 8C 2300 Spyder going into 180th place with a 132.646. Beats out a Jaguar E-Type by quite a margin, in fact, which is pretty incredible. Loses out slightly to a BMW 2002 Turbo, but yeah, a really good time from the 8C. Moving down once again, the Bugatti Type 35C goes into 204th place with a 130.134, squidging itself in between the International Scout and the Land Rover Defender. This is a weird leaderboard, but yeah, a fairly noble effort from the oldest car in the game. And finally, we find the rest of the cars today. 213th place goes to the BMW 328 with a 142.370, which does beat out the Grand Wagoneer, which is pretty incredible. Beats out Scirocco, Land Cruiser, pretty good time. In 220th place, we find the Ford Deluxe from 1932, 151.570. Lose out to a Nissan Safari Turbo Diesel. And in 221st place, it is the second slowest car we've ever had, the Willys Jeep, with a 151.771. Honestly, I kind of wish the Jeep would have beaten the Deluxe, because the Jeep is a much better handling car than the Deluxe, but you know, power deficit at this sort of place in the market with this lower class of cars, yeah, power really is a lot. It's not quite everything, but it is almost everything. Anyways, of course, the bottom of the leaderboard is where most of the cars ended up today, and, well, for next time, we're going to stick to the bottom of the leaderboard, because instead of looking at the oldest cars, next time, we're going to take a look at the slowest cars here in Forza Motorsport 7. So I hope you join me for that. Thank you all very much for watching, and until next time, farewell.
She found me outside one Sunday morning, begging money from a man I didn't know. She took me in and wiped away my childhood. A woman of the streets, this lady Rose.